Donald Trump has been confirmed as the U.S. Republican Party's presidential candidate. And despite the bandage on his right ear at the convention on Monday following an assassination attempt on the former president, he announced his vice presidential candidate to the party. Trump picked U.S. Senator JD Vance, a native of Ohio, who has gained popular attention after the release of his best-selling memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, which tells a story of his blue-collar upbringing and how it affected his politics and worldview. And Vance is only 29 years old, but his onboarding to the Trump campaign is expected to provide a youthful counterpoint to the candidates at the top of both presidential tickets. Here's more from day one at the Republican Party convention in Milwaukee.
Donald Trump receiving a raucous ovation as he made a presence on the first night of the Republican National Convention alongside his newly announced running mate, U.S. Senator JD Vance. This is coming 2 days after an assassination attempt left him with a wounded ear. The former president mouthed the words "thank you" to the crowd before shaking hands with his freshly picked running mate, U.S. Senator JD Vance, next to him.
He's here tonight.
The Republican Party have officially nominated the former president to run again for the White House at the start of the party's 4-day national convention in Milwaukee.
This is an endeavor to make America strong again. And say it with me, fellow Republicans, this is an endeavor to make America great again. So here we go. It is my honor to nominate Donald J. Trump for the office of President of the United States.
Delegates also approved Donald Trump's selection of JD Vance, a U.S. Senator from Ohio, as his running mate.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to determine our nominee for the office of Vice President of the United States. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed signify by saying no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Mr. Trump is due to formally accept the party's nomination in a primetime speech on Thursday to face Democratic President Joe Biden in the November 5 election. While Mr. Vance is scheduled to address the convention on Wednesday, the 39-year-old was a fierce Trump critic in 2016, but he has since become one of the former president's staunchest defenders, embracing Trump's false claims that the 2020 election was marred by widespread fraud. The 4-day convention began less than 48 hours after a gunman opened fire at the outdoor rally, killing one supporter and injuring former U.S. President Donald Trump.
The convention was also an opportunity for Republican Party bigwigs to make a case for Donald Trump's return to the White House. Many of the convention speakers said Americans would be better off if they returned the former president to the White House. The first night of convention was focused on economic issues.
The Democrats ripped open our borders and allowed millions of illegal aliens to pour in, driving up the cost of housing and health care while slashing American wages and eliminating jobs. They claim that our economy is thriving, yet hundreds of thousands of American-born workers lost their jobs these past few years. The Democrats' economy is of, by, and for illegal aliens.
The brave heart of our time, President Trump, had our economy roaring. Gas was up below $2. Unemployment was at a historic low. People could afford homes. And we had a president who protected manufacturing jobs. Under President Trump, the American dream was alive and well. Under President Trump, there was hope. And we need that now more than ever. So this November, let's select the braveheart of our time, Donald J. Trump, to get our economy back on track.
If you didn't believe in miracles before Saturday, you better be believing right now. Thank God Almighty that we live in a country that still believes in the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the Alpha and the Omega. Because on Saturday, the devil came to Pennsylvania holding a rifle, but an American lion got back up on his feet and he roared. Oh yeah, America is not a racist country. But if you were looking for racism today, you'd find it in cities run by Democrats. Look on the south side of Chicago. Poor black kids trapped in failing schools. Thousands shot every single year, including one of my former interns, Daquan. But there's good news. It's conservative values that restores hope. It's Republican policies that lifts people up.
And the former President Donald Trump has been coasting since the assassination attempt on his life on Saturday. His supporters growing. Everyone is sympathetic to what happened to him. U.S. President Joe Biden even gave an address from the Oval Office. Global leaders, including Nigeria's president, condemned the violence and conveyed their good wishes. But let's not forget that Trump will be running against the Democratic Party nominee Joe Biden in November. Here to discuss how recent developments impact on the elections, I'm joined by political analyst Curtis Adigba. Curtis, thank you for joining us on the program. Let me begin by getting your thoughts on the attempted assassination on the former U.S. president on Saturday.
Thank you, Amarachi, for having me. I think that violence in whatever form in politics is despicable and should never have a place in any country of the world, not to talk less of the North Star of democracy, the United States of America. And so it is horrible, it is horrific, it's so saddening and sobering. It should never have happened, but it did happen. And thank God that the gunman did not succeed in taking out Trump. Otherwise, by now, conspiracy theories would have been everywhere. What is important is that politicians all over the world must understand that the words they use have consequences and that words do matter. Like I said to someone, in as much as violence is despicable and something we should all condemn, there is no denying the fact that politicians on the right and on the left in America, especially on the right, cannot minimize their responsibility for what has happened. And that is why it is important that politicians understand that wars, again, are consequential, and the things that they say may not be processed by all individuals in a rational manner. And so it is important that they weigh and measure their words before they speak them out. Now, you have a situation in America where on both sides of the aisle, they frame political conversation around enemies of our countries. If you hear people on the right describe people on the left, you think that these are people carrying guns wanting to destroy America, how they want to take their country back from the enemies of America, how the people on the left have destroyed America, and it's time to chase the enemies out of the country. And I think it's important that they're just beginning to realize what has happened. And don't forget that assassinations or attempted assassinations have always been part of American political history. Of course, you are aware that 4 American presidents have been killed or assassinated in the past. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th president, was assassinated. James Garfield, the 20th president, was also assassinated. William McKinley, the 25th president, was also assassinated. And then JFK, the 35th president, was assassinated. And there have also been series of attempts. Of course, the most recent before that of Trump was Ronald Reagan. So it's not new.
Indeed, it is not new, but it is sad, and I'm sure that you're very aware there are many who think that this was some sort of political manipulation. Did it seem like that to you?
Well, when things happen like this, there are bound to be different kind of interpretation. Now, if you look at the optics and look at the setting, for instance, questions have been asked as to how that young man penetrated the security architecture that was built around the former president, the perimeter, Yeah. It's also important to know that a few minutes before the shooting started, someone had drawn the attention of the Secret Service to the young man who was on top of the roof carrying AR-15 rifle. And a policeman also confronted him. He threatened to shoot the policeman. And in spite of all this, nothing happened. Again, I don't know if you saw what happened that as the shooting was going on and the former president was cowering down, yeah, and Secret Service climbing on top of him, there was a woman who is so comfortable to the point of pulling out her phones and trying to record everything that was happening. So as a result of all this, a lot of people have come out to say, well, this probably may just be an organized kind of event to draw attention to the former president and then rile up his base. But I want to believe that there were a lot of people who dropped the balls and that indeed there was an attempt to assassinate the former president. For whatever reason, we still don't know because the FBI, up to this moment, has not been able to establish any motive. What we do know, as a matter of fact, is that this young man who lives in Bethel Park, just some few miles away from Butler where the event happened, is a registered Republican, but he's also giving money to causes by the Democratic Party. So not until these issues are unraveled and then a motive is established, we'll still continue to have this conspiracy theory.
Yes, and I know that the FBI has said that they're investigating this issue, especially the role of Secret Service agents, during the rally, their response, first of all, to the guy on the roof and all of that. But I'm also thinking it is interesting that, in the behind the scenes, there is no talk about his family, no identification of who his family members are, his parents. They haven't even claimed responsibility or, taken accountability for the gun that he possessed, because it was said that the gun that he used belonged to his father. And then the bombs and the other artillery that they found, in his vehicle and in his home, they also said he got them from his father. So there has been no accountability from his parents and been no word from them, anyone who knew him from the past.
Yeah, I think the father spoke about 2 days ago, but he said he wasn't going to go ahead of the FBI investigation. What is clear is that he bought the rifle, he has the right to buy the rifle, and he bought it in a legal way. Now, as to how his son got his rifle and for what purpose, or whether there was a conspiracy between him and his son, nobody knows that. What we do understand at the moment is that FBI has cordoned off their house, and they are still investigating. And so in the next few days, they promise to inform the public about their findings.
Yeah, I want to talk about, the response to this. And a lot of U.S. politicians have, condemned the political violence. Even U.S. President Joe Biden did give an address from the White House from the Oval Office of the White House, the third address that he's made from there since he became president. A lot of sympathy came from leaders from across the globe. Nigeria's president condemned the violence as well, also conveying his good wishes to former President Trump. You had the French President Emmanuel Macron also condemning political violence. Former U.S. President Barack Obama also condemned, the violence as well. Current Vice President Kamala Harris also condemned the violence. There's so much sympathy for Trump at this time, almost making everyone forget that, the former president will be running in the November elections, and he'll be running against current President Joe Biden.
Yeah, it is good to see politicians come together in unity for a noble cause like preaching against violence in politics. But again, we must not forget that this did not happen in isolation. You cannot minimize the role former President Trump himself has been playing in whipping up sentiments, in setting up Americans against themselves, describing some Americans as enemies of America and the need to take the country back from them. You saw that even after the shooting incident, right? You would expect that when he gets up, he should have been sober. But all he did was to raise his fist and say, fight, 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 thereby rallying up the people. But the interesting thing is, I heard last night that Trump has changed his speech. He was going to give a very hot, divisive, and incendiary speech. But given what happened, the campaign decided that there was a need for him to tone down his rhetoric and try to bring unity into the country. Not only him, JD Vance, who he had advised shortly before the convention started that he was going to speak for the VP position, also had to change his speech. And Glenn Youngkin, who spoke last night, that's the governor of Virginia, you saw that the common theme was unity and the need for Americans to come together, except Senator Ron Johnson, who went off the script and was still talking about the need to take their country back from the enemies of America, those who have opened the borders and all that. The truth of the matter is that when politicians speak in divisive and incendiary ways, they don't understand that it could have consequences beyond politics. I'll give you an example. In 2016, a man loaded his rifle all the way from Ohio and drove to Washington to come and kill people in a Pizza Hut because he believed what Michael Flynn and his son were saying on the internet, that Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, Joe Biden were operating a pedophilic group within that Pizza Hut, that the young girls were being molested and they were being killed and their body parts devoted to Satan. He came into Washington, shot into the place, and then eventually got in to investigate and saw that there was nothing like that happening. And this is why it is critical that they realize that words have consequences. What you say might be taken out of context completely by someone who is listening. And that was exactly what we saw. We still don't have a motive, but it is important that politicians dial back this hot, incendiary, and hot, divisive rhetoric that you hear all over the world. Interestingly, people also must understand that America leads the world as far as democracy is concerned. And whatever is normalized in America will filter to other parts of the world. And this is what we are saying. Now, as to whether the sympathy for Trump, yes, it lifted him up a little bit in the polls, but you can see that the polls are still very tight in spite of what has happened. As to whether this will completely move the needle in his favor, we are watching. What I do know is that there's one positive for Joe Biden, and that positive is the fact that nobody is talking about him openly dropping out of the race right now. Yeah. Because the entire focus is on what has happened.
You're really right, and I thought you were going to speak some more about that. So let's explore that a bit. The rhetoric on Joe Biden himself stepping down, from the race, all of that has died down. Is this because the Democrats realize in the end? Number one, it's too late in the game to change a candidate. And then secondly, because maybe they have resolved that, this election has already been won by Trump.
Well, I don't think so. I think that there are two reasons two reasons here right away. Number one, you heard someone like Senator Bernie Sanders coming out openly to say to the Democrats, let's stop this circular firing squad. Let's get behind our nominee, Joe Biden. That's one trend in the Democratic Party. The second trend, are those who are on the fringe right now, saying the president does not have what it takes. He lacks the mental acuity and the vigor to go up against Trump. Of course, Joe is out trying to dispel that whole idea. I think this morning he's in Nevada, all right, in Nevada to campaign, and he has chosen this small but personalized kind of campaigns where he talks to about 50, 60 people, and try to reel out his vision, his accomplishment, and all that. Of course, this is not an issue that will just die down completely. But what is important, and I think what the Democrats are beginning to look at is that, okay, even if we bump off Joe Biden right now, who is going to be our candidate in the election that is capable of setting up this campaign right now? Because you see, setting up a presidential campaign infrastructure is a behemoth. Yes, you can inherit the Democratic Party structure, but you also need your campaign as a candidate, right? So the Democrats are looking and saying, is it going to be Governor Gavin Newsom of California? Is it going to be Vice President? No, I'm not sure. I'm sure you have seen the post that puts all these candidates, rumored candidates, up against Trump, right? Mm-hmm. The reality is that when they become the official candidates, the dynamics of the race is still going to change. Like what happened last night with the pick of JD Vance. Now, I've listened to some Republicans this afternoon saying it was a horrible pick, for several reasons. One is inexperience. Two, it was a never Trumper for a long time. And you can Google, JD Vance, and you see everything he said about Trump, how he had no morality, how he was despicable, and all that. And then he turned full cycle and says he's now supporting President Trump. Of course, he has the right to change his mind. However, the positions of JD Vance on so many issues is going to, help to rally up the Democratic base. The choice of JD Vance alone is giving the Democrats hope that Joe Biden might be able to make a strong case against Trump. And so the cause for him to step out of the race is dying down. But whether it's going to completely fizzle out, I'm not sure of that.
Well, these are topics that we will need to explore before the elections. Thank you so much, Curtis, for getting on the program. We'll sure be reaching out to you, as developments come. Thanks again. Let's put some spotlight now on Trump's vice presidential candidate. JD Vance is described as an author, a venture capitalist, a politician, lawyer, and former U.S. Marine, serving as the junior United States Senator from Ohio since 2023. And as we mentioned earlier, he came into prominence with his 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy, which describes his upbringing in the Rust Belt, poverty, drug addiction, and Appalachian culture. It later became a New York Times bestseller. Vance has described the former president, Donald Trump, as America's Hitler. He's also compared him to a cultural heroin, a new pain reliever that promised easy solutions. I beg your pardon, that's a cultural heroin, a new pain reliever that promised easy solutions to the mounting social problems of suffering communities, but that ultimately could not fix what ails them. Reactions, however, have trailed the announcement of his nomination as vice presidential candidate.
I'd say, first of all, it's not an unsurprising pick. Vance has been one of the top names that have been talked about for many weeks now. He's an interesting guy. He's a senator and recently been elected senator. And I think the thing that's critical for Vance, the thing that makes him attractive to Trump and to Republicans, is that he's got a real blue-collar background. And even though he is a Yale-trained lawyer, an Ivy League lawyer, he has maintained this kind of credibility and ties to that more rural parts of America. One thing it's important to remember is that it's the political science research on this has really shown that a vice president has almost no impact on winning or losing a campaign. It might pick you up a percentage point or two in the person's home state, but that's really about it. Trump was going to get Ohio anyway. He'd likely to win Florida anyway as well. So I don't think that that really went into the calculations.
I think this is a young candidate for vice president. This is something I think Donald Trump, by choosing someone this young, helps, to expand the party and expand a reach into younger generations. And really, I think from Donald Trump's point of view, it's a forward-looking choice.
While reactions continue trailing JD Vance becoming Trump's vice presidential candidate, the run-in to the White House, people in Middletown, Ohio, where Vance grew up, have been voicing their support.
I think it's great. We got somebody from our area, Middletown. Jim, yes, I'm glad. Good choice. I'm sure he'll be able to do best for me. Because he knows my life here, just like his, to help us with this economy that's blown out of proportion and get the damn border closed.
No, I want Donald Trump to be president. Well, everyone in this town, good, lovely people, if you meet the right people.
Back to the U.S. president now. He was reacting to another development, which is the dismissal of a case concerning Donald Trump's handling of classified documents, which was dismissed yesterday. According to President Joe Biden, the ruling was, quote, specious. He was speaking during an interview on Monday with NBC's Lester Holt. President Biden emphasized there is no significant gap between him and the former U.S. president for the upcoming November 5 election, noting that current polling stations, polling shows a lot of different things. Now, when asked if Barack Obama and Michelle Obama should be more vocal in their support, Biden assured them that they have been supportive since the beginning of his campaign, but emphasized that it was his responsibility to get this done.
I didn't say crosshair. Very cordial. I told him how concerned I was and wanted to make sure I knew how he was actually doing. He sounded good. He said he was fine. And he thanked me for calling him. I told him he was literally in the prayers of Jill and me. And I hope his whole family was weathering this. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's. It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that one accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. I've thought less about the trajectory of the case than two things. One, what his health is, that was secure, number one. And number two, what happens from here on in terms of the kind of coverage that the president and vice president and former president and new vice president get in terms of, look, I've never seen a circumstance where you ride through certain rural areas of the country and people have signs there, big Trump signs with middle signs saying F Biden, and a little kid standing there putting up his middle finger. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that is just inflammatory and kind of viciousness. It's a very different thing than to say, look, I really disagree with Trump's the way he takes care of taxes. 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listen to them. It's not unusual. He's going to surround himself with people who agree completely with him. Have a voting record. I support him.
U.S. President Joe Biden. Now, billionaire Elon Musk has said he plans to commit around $45 million a month to a new pro-Trump super political action committee. According to the Wall Street Journal, they cited people familiar with the matter. Musk had indicated that he plans to start donations in July to the America PAC, backing former President Donald Trump's presidential run. However, the South Africa-born businessman was not listed on a Monday filing by the group, which shows that it has more than $8 million. Lonsdale Enterprises and Winklevoss twins were among the donors to America PAC. Lonsdale donated $1 million, and Cameron and Tyler Winklevoss each contributed $250,000. The world's richest person and billionaire chief executive of Tesla did not respond to comments about the issue. But on social media platform X, he replied to a Wall Street Journal post on the report with a meme featuring words fake news in an apparent reference to so-called fake news. China has rejected being used by the United States as a presidential election issue. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson says in response to a remark made by Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's running mate JD Vance. In one of his first few interviews since being named as Trump's running mate, the Ohio senator branded China as the biggest threat to the U.S. and Washington should focus on Beijing as the real issue once the Russia-Ukraine crisis is brought to a close. Well, China's foreign ministry says Beijing is against the U.S. using China as an election issue when asked to comment on Vance's remarks. In another development, Professor of International Relations at New York's school, Nina Khrushcheva, says Russian President Vladimir Putin may think that the more instability there is in America, the better it is for Russia, adding that if Trump is elected, it's better for Putin. Well, she was speaking about the assassination attempt on Saturday on the former U.S. president. The Kremlin had on Sunday said it did not believe the U.S. administration was responsible for Saturday's assassination attempt, but accused it of creating an atmosphere that provoked the attack.
The more instability it is in the United States, the better it is for Russia. And that's what I'm saying. You know, if Trump is elected, it's better for Putin, just because America is in shambles over, after 40 years. Well, Trump is not president, but was president after Ronald Reagan, the presidential candidate or the former president, potentially future president, has survived the assassination attempt. I mean, that's a story. And so in this sense, yes, absolutely. I mean, America just proven to the world that it is discombobulated and how it is not a welcoming sign for Putin. And as for this comment on, Biden created this kind of an environment, and therefore Biden is an enemy to Putin, or Biden made Putin an enemy. And so Trump is an enemy to Biden. Therefore, of course, those who are not my friend is, what was that? The friend of, no, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, something like that, right? So, of course, they are going to say Biden created it, because there is the way Russia sees it, the atmosphere of hatred towards Russia is certainly Biden pushed. And it is Biden pushed. Trump is being impeached, prosecuted, indicted, and now an assassination attempt. I mean, how else an enemy of Biden is going to see that? So in this sense, but I wouldn't really make Russia the villain of this, let me put it this way, because it is sort of a convenient rhetoric always that Russia would, if something happens, Russia would be the main problem. I wouldn't, but Putin would certainly benefit and certainly enjoy, even if he doesn't benefit, he certainly enjoy that show that is happening in the United States, because the more out of shape America is, and then before that, of course, they were tremendously enjoying replacing Biden, not replacing Biden. I mean, that kind of scandal is also a fascinating thing for those who consider themselves adversarial to the United States.
We'll segue from American politics now. 4 soldiers, including an officer, being killed in a militant attack on an Indian Army patrol in Jammu and Kashmir. A firefight broke out after militants ambushed the foot patrol in the woods of Doda district late on Monday. It's the latest incident of violence in the Hindu-dominated part of the Himalayan region. It brings to 11 this year's tally of Indian soldiers killed in such attacks. India and Pakistan both claim the Himalayan region of Kashmir, but rule it in part. India blames Pakistan for training, funding and pushing militants into its part of Kashmir from across a ceasefire lane, a charge that Pakistan denies. 6 people, including a policeman, are dead now, several wounded by gunfire in the vicinity of a mosque in Oman. The attackers were also killed by security forces during the incident in the Al-Wadi Al-Kabir area on Monday night. It's a rare breach of security in one of the most stable countries in the Middle East. There was no immediate claim from any group, but supporters of the Sunni jihadist group Islamic State celebrated the shooting on social media networks. Oman has maintained its neutrality in the turbulent region and mediated in disputes, including between the United States and Iran. A bus carrying Inditex workers crashed and got stuck at the exit of a tunnel in Pineda de Mar near Barcelona, Spain. That vehicle was lodged in an almost vertical position, injuring dozens of people, leaving three of them in critical condition. The bus was traveling between Barcelona and Tordera in Spain's northeastern region of Catalonia. There were 52 people on board, 3 of whom were flown by helicopter to hospitals, and dozens more in less serious condition were treated nearby or transferred to health centers. There's been no information available as to what caused the accident, but traffic authorities are asking drivers to avoid the area as emergency services expect work removing the bus to take several hours. Israel has intercepted rockets fired from Lebanon over the town of Kiryat Shmona, causing flares to light up the sky. The Israeli army identified air defense systems approximately 20 launches from Lebanon in 2 separate barrages on Kiryat Shmona and the area close to the border and intercepted the rockets. It claims there are no casualties from the night attack. Hezbollah vows to keep shelling as long as Israel's war on Palestinian Islamist group Hamas continues. Both militant groups are allies of Iran. Well, Palestinians have been digging through rubble of a house destroyed by an Israeli airstrike in Gaza's al-Nusayrat. Israel calculates that its army struck about 40 targets across the enclave, including sniping and observation posts, military structures and buildings rigged with explosives. Palestinian health officials say at least 13 people have been killed in Israeli bombardments in southern and central areas of the enclave as Israel chased down Hamas-led fighters in several areas across Gaza today. The United Nations, however, is set to bring in more armored vehicles and personnel protection equipment for its humanitarian aid operations in the Gaza Strip following approval from Israeli authorities. The approval was in response to a UN letter sent to Israel last month on safety and security in Gaza. The UN has a long-standing complaint of obstacles getting in the way of aid to Gaza and says it also is struggling to distribute aid amid total lawlessness within the enclave of 2.3 million people. The UN wants communications that do not rely on cell phone towers because they're not reliable. But Israeli authorities have security concerns about what Hamas could do if it accesses satellite internet services.
For us to be able to meet the basic necessities of the population that is displaced and treat the injuries that people have sustained, we need to bring aid in at scale in the right quantity and the right quality. But unfortunately, several factors continue to stand in our way that would allow us to bring humanitarian supplies into Gaza at scale. They include restrictions on movement, safety of humanitarian aid workers, not the right supplies coming to Gaza, unpredictable working hours, telecommunication challenges, as well as fuel. And recently, there's been a substantial increase in the breakdown of law and order in Gaza. This started in February when the blue police were told to stay home. And it really came to light and was exacerbated when the conflict in Rafah began, and the police were unable to exert any presence in Rafah. And we've seen a complete breakdown of law and order, and we've seen essentially what are crime families preventing the free movement of aid into Gaza to assist people. A lot of that's due to smuggling. It's not people that are simply hungry and thirsty and looking for aid, but it has had a significant impact on our ability to bring things in at scale. The truck drivers that we use have been regularly threatened or assaulted. Tires were shot out of their trucks on Friday. And they've become less and less willing, understandably, to move assistance from the border crossings to our warehouses and then on to people that are in need. We have had some challenges with people looting, which really isn't a surprise. After 9 months, people are hungry, people are angry, people are desperate. And as I mentioned, there aren't any police to maintain social order. For the north, we're able to get between 25 and 70 trucks in every day. What we don't have in the north is commercial access, and I think that's the other thing that would be needed to ensure we have the right amount of quality and quantity of goods entering into the north.
It's hot and temperatures are rising all across Europe. The continent is currently facing a series of extreme weather events with heat waves in Turkey and Hungary and severe storms in Germany. These conditions have significantly impacted daily life, leading to cancellations and warnings across the continent. In Turkey, an intense heat wave continues to grip the nation. Temperatures in the southern and western regions have consistently exceeded 40 degrees Celsius since the beginning of summer, far above the seasonal norm. Italy has placed 12 cities under the most severe heat warning as a wave of hot air baked southern Europe and sent temperatures to over 40 degrees Celsius, with the worst still to come. Municipal authorities in several southern European and Balkan cities are taking measures to look after elderly people in particular. In Greece, municipalities made air-conditioned spaces available to the public. Certain forms of outdoor work were banned, such as manual labor, deliveries, and construction during the hottest time of the day, when temperatures reached 40 degrees Celsius. Well, Ukrainians are also battling a record heat wave as residents are grappling with rolling blackouts from Russia's continued attacks on the country's energy system. The combination is creating a nightmare for the wider economy and for everyday life. Regular Russian airstrikes have ravaged the country's energy system, leading to hours-long rolling blackouts. The Central Geophysical Observatory said today it had clocked a record high of 93.5 degrees Fahrenheit in Kyiv for July 15. Temperatures today are expected to reach even higher. Ukraine's broader economy is also struggling in the heat. State weather forecasters say the harvest of late crops could decline by up to 30% in central, southern, and eastern regions. The country's grid operator announced a new emergency power shutdowns for some consumers in 7 areas, but not including Kyiv, due to the heat wave following a failure of equipment. In Rwanda, President Paul Kagame is on course to extend his 24-year rule by another 5 years in landslide victory. With about 79% of the votes counted, Kagame has garnered over 99% of votes in the country. He has led the country since 1994, faced minimal opposition with Frank Habineza of the Democratic Green Party and independent candidate Philippe Mpayimana, who he overwhelmingly defeated in 2017. Frank Habineza had only 0.53% of votes this time round. Former journalist and government advisor Mpayimana had only 0.32% of the votes. Well, the president has given his acceptance speech and thanked Rwandans for their trust in an address to the supporters at the Rwanda Patriotic Front Party headquarters. The full provisional results are expected by July 20 and final results are expected on the 27th. Much earlier, my colleague Layo Larinde spoke with the VOA's Maria Diallo, who is in Kigali monitoring the elections.
Honest, I would even tell you that it's hard to report on it after the elections, even during the elections, when you were at the polling stations trying to interview people and seeing if somebody out there can tell you that they are voting for one of the opposition candidates. It was very hard to do, and from our contacts here and people that we have here, and we would ask, how come, and they would say, it's just not going to be easy for you to find somebody, who's going to tell you that they are voting for one of the independent candidates. But I have to say, though, during the campaign rallies, when I traveled to Gicumbi, an hour and a half away, about 2 hours from Kigali, to participate in one of the opposition candidates' rally, the Democratic Green Party candidate, Frank Habineza, I was able to find 1 or 2 people who stood there and told us that they would be voting for Mr. Habineza, and then they gave us the reasons why. So I think it was easier to find some people at a rally that was for an opposition leader than when you were actually there at the voting stations for people to tell you who they're voting for. But that's okay as well, because the vote is also a secret act. So usually we would ask the question as to, you don't have to tell us who you're going to be voting for, but you can at least tell us the issues and what kind of person do you want to see lead Rwanda in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, basically, who do you want to be the next leader of Rwanda?
Well, in Kenya, at least one person has been killed in renewed anti-government protests as police clashed with demonstrators demanding that President William Ruto step down. In Kitengela, a town on the southern outskirts of the capital, Nairobi, police opened fire on protesters who threw rocks, burnt tires, chanting Ruto must go. Activists are also demanding systemic changes to clean up corruption and poor governance. According to Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, at least 50 people have been killed in protests to date. The United States government has signed educational partnerships with Nigeria, 3 universities in the country, a historic feat happening as the partnership between Lagos and Atlanta turns 50 this year. The event took place at the University of Lagos, Akoka, and was attended by Spelman College President, a member of the U.S. Presidential Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement. In her address, Dr. Helen Gill says the diaspora has always been central to students' educational development, especially historically black colleges and universities. UNILAG Vice Chancellor said knowledge sharing with other universities will help speed development.
I think it is opportunities like this that really help to catalyze these kinds of partnerships and lead to the important trust and understanding that makes sure that these partnerships don't just start by signing an agreement, but they become actual living documents that I think all of us will look back on in years to come and realize that we have made a real contribution, not only to furthering our partnership as Africa and the diaspora, but also for making sure that our young people and the next generation have what they need to make their contribution to our world.
We have a young and teeming population, and it's very clear that the future requires innovation. It requires a lot of change. It's going to have a lot of change, and if we're going to move fast, we need to tap into what our friends are doing. We need to be part of the global community, and part of this is recognizing that we have a lot to share from the African continent, but we also have a lot to learn. And so today marks a very, very important beginning for collaboration across between the universities in Lagos and the diaspora.
As we end the program, get your luggage ready. Let's fly to Thailand. That's if you're part of the 93 countries who have been admitted into its visa-free entry scheme because the government is looking to revitalize its tourism industry. Visitors can stay in the Southeast Asian nation now for up to 60 days under the new scheme that took effect Monday. Previously, passport holders from 57 countries were allowed to enter without a visa. Morocco and South Africa are the only two African countries on the list. Others include the US, the UK, France, Australia, India, Indonesia, and 85 more countries. Tourism is a key pillar of the Thai economy, but it's not fully recovered from the pandemic. Well, that's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.